Well, cool. Live here with Jimmy Blackmon. We got Cory Myers with Lubbock Consulting.
Philip Robb with Robb Technology Group.
Today our special guest, like I said, is Jimmy Blackmon, professional speaker, executive coach, managing partner at Exactus Advisors, author of Cowboys over Iraq, Leadership from the Saddle, and Palehorse, hunting terrorists and commanding heroes with 101st Airborne Division, as well as Southern Roots, retired Army Colonel Jimmy F. Blackmon. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jimmy, first things first, just kind of, I guess, tell our audience a little bit about you, about why you are doing what you're doing and how you got there.
You know, it's interesting that you say that right now because I'm writing some pieces and I was looking through, I'm a pretty good journaler, and I was looking through old journals. And I'd forgotten ever writing this, but in 1992, I wrote, I think with some training, I would be a decent motivational speaker and author. I had no idea that I'd go on that. It blew me away when I read it. I was looking for something totally different. But that's kind of where it went. I've always loved reading good work and writing. So I just needed content. And I guess the wars of post 9/11 provided me with a lot of material to do that. So I started writing and speaking, and then when I retired, debating what I'd do next. I didn't want to go work for the same guys in a suit versus a uniform. So the defense industry is not something I wanted to do at the time. I kind of wanted to do it on my own, and so I decided to leverage the writing and the speaking. So when I began just speaking professionally at conferences and doing leadership seminars and stuff with companies, and it just kept growing and growing into some executive coaching and really helping companies then with mission, vision, alignment, accountability, things like that. And so I was consulting without even thinking about it, and met some guys who would go on to become my best friends in the world. My three partners at Exactus Advisors, they had a consulting firm already, and we began doing some work together and found it was just a wonderful fit for what we do. And so I became a managing partner there last year.
Wow, that is quite amazing. So tell us kind of, I'm sure a bunch of our audience is wondering how you got started in the military. When did you join? How did you start? Did you do enlisted first? What college you went to? And all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the Army was a way out for me. The only thing I ever debated growing up was which shift I would work. The mill was a foregone conclusion. That's what my people did. But I had a master's degree at developing courses of action and a strategy for what I wanted to do, because two things were important to me: chasing girls and hunting and fishing. And so I decided very early on at, like 16, 17 years old, that I could work third shift. That way I worked during the night, I get off in the morning, I could go hunting or fishing, get a nap in the afternoon, and I could date at night. So I decided I would just go to the mill and work third shift, and that would be perfect for me. And an Army recruiter knocked on our raggedy screen door up in northern Georgia, and he said, "Hey, son, how would you like to join the Army?" My dad had been drafted for the Korean War, went and did his tour, came back, hung that old Eisenhower jacket in the closet, Corporal Blackmon. And when that recruiter asked me if I'd like to join the Army, I saw myself just like that, Corporal Blackmon. And I said, yeah, where'd I sign? And so I enlisted and went in '86, and he asked me if I wanted to go to college someday, and I started laughing at him. My people don't go to college. There's no way I could afford college, man, no way. And he said, no, Uncle Sam will help you to go to college. And I was like, really? He explained the GI Bill to me, and I said, sign me up, sounds good. So he signed me up, and in '91, I was commissioned out of North Georgia College, one of the 4 senior military schools in the country, and to go fly airplanes. I went to flight school after that, and the rest, I guess, is history. People ask, did you think you were going to stay in? I wasn't positive, but I was sure there was nothing to go back to at home. And so one thing led to another, and 30 years later, you're trying to figure out what you want to do when you grow up.
Now you said you went to flight school. What did you end up flying?
OH-58 Deltas, Kiowa. That really. So the whole time I was at North Georgia, I planned to be an infantry officer. That's all I wanted to do. And when I went to pre-camp, and they showcase all the branches. Aviation didn't necessarily appeal to me, but the cavalry mission did. And what appealed was they seemed to have a lot of latitude to go develop the situation. They operated on commander's intent and were more independent. And that really appealed to me. And my undergrad was in history, and I had studied a lot of cavalry leaders, obviously on the ground throughout history. And so that's what drew me to that airframe and that mission set.
Now that's like a Bell 206 variant, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, the Jet Ranger,
Okay.
close to it.
Yeah, it's real cute. It's got a little ball on top. I remember very fondly. Yeah, I remember in Afghanistan we were getting some of the human back, and I think it was captain at the time, maybe Wisniewski, coming back and saying that the Afghanis were saying that the ball on top was a mind reader, and that was one of my first experiences with really thinking about the art of war, and saying and I can't remember the exact phrasing, but don't correct the enemy while they're making a mistake. So we kind of just let that one slide and say, yeah, sure, mind reading. Yeah, that's why we know where you are. So it was real fun to have those airframes around. What do you think about the new setup with the pink teams? And I know we were in the 717th Cav together. They're now at Hood, and they're doing Apaches and UAVs.
Yeah, so obviously the OH-58 Delta is no longer in the inventory, and they are competing. They're down to two companies that are competing for the future vertical lift variant of the Armed Scout Reconnaissance platform. We'll see where that goes. Last time we did this, Comanche was the program, and it was supposed to replace the OH-58 Delta. But as fast as technology moves and the capabilities, you just keep adding to it. And before long, the Comanche was just another Apache. And we didn't need another Apache. We had the best aircraft on the attack aircraft in the world. And so we didn't need another one of those. So there's a fine balance. I hope the Army does this well and balancing between, not another attack aircraft, but something that fills the role of armed reconnaissance. It is a different role. We played around with UAVs trying to do the mission set, and it's just not the same from my perspective. There's something about the way, in Palehorse, my book, I've got a chapter called A Cavalry State of Mind. And it's a way of thinking. It's what I call situational curiosity. A pilot flies over, sees five guys sitting in a field, and they've got on street shoes versus sandals. There's no sheep. And he says, I wonder what they're doing. I wonder if they came in on that trail. Where does that trail lead? Why are they here? It develops that situation. A UAV doesn't do that. And so that optic is different. So teaming UAVs with Apaches looks and feels a bit different than a guy out there, with a cold wind in his face, feeling it and experiencing it. So we'll see where it goes. I'm not in the saddle anymore, so to speak. So I will observe from the sidelines. Obviously, I'll have an opinion. Shame on me if I don't. But it's fun to watch where we're going. I mean, obviously, in the world of technology and capability, things change so rapidly today. It's hard to find a good enough solution and execute without it being obsolete by the time you field it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, one of the things that I really loved about the culture that was brought forth with you and the prior lieutenant colonel before you in the Cav, while I was in, both of you guys really imparted a sense of adaptability and making sure that we were fluid in all situations. And on top of that, we were given given these roles of leadership at the lowest of the enlisted, we were in charge of get it done at the lowest level. And then if you exhausted all of your resources, then we move it up to the next person. But you need to exhaust all your resources before you pass it up. And that adaptability and critical thinking and things like that, from the macro level of changing airframes to the micro level of just having a battlefield awareness, was just absolutely critical in that unit. And I think that we owe a lot to the leadership, for instance, in that case, because it was, you guys are in charge and we're here to help from the leadership standpoint.
Well, you just described exactly what I do for a living now. Companies are no different. They were a mirror image of the Cold War industrial age military, very hierarchical, very bureaucratic. In Palehorse, I tell this story about sitting with an Air Force lieutenant colonel when I was in Bosnia on a deployment. And he said, "Jimmy, you know what's wrong with the Army?" And I just kind of laughed. I was like, well, I can think of a couple of things, but I'm really curious about what you're about to tell me. And he said, now think about our rank structure for those that aren't in the military. It's lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel. He said, "Jimmy, the Army thinks that the smartest captain is just a little bit dumber than the dumbest major, based on rank." And it's true. These hierarchies, it's about what position are you in, and your intellect, your ability to contribute, your understanding is based on your rank and position. And it mirrors corporate America and these Cold War industrial age institutions that are, where all the senior leaders make all the decisions, they issue the orders, and everybody else does what they're told. And frankly, that slows them down. It's bureaucratic. And so I didn't have all the answers as the leader of that task force, but I knew I was surrounded by really smart young men and women with great ideas for how to make us better. What my role as the leader was to create a culture of empowerment and trust where junior soldiers, regardless of rank, socioeconomic background, position, if you knew something was, could make us better, you threw your ideas on the table and you were empowered to help us evolve and grow. That made us fast. That made us agile. Whereas we see a lot of organizations, particularly in the military, where the senior leadership makes all the decisions and they shut down, a lot of their junior soldiers.
Yeah, I find that as well. I think we differ in a little bit of the consulting side for the mere fact of I focus more on processes and things like that. But at the same time, you can't have a working process without that kind of a leadership structure. It just that it's antiquated, and if you're having this process issue down the line, and the lower enlisted, as you will, or if you will, they can't fix it, then you've got to pass it up the chain. Then guess what? By the time you've passed it up the chain, something's okay. We've put it into this, and all everything kind of has blown up since then. So now it's a big deal as opposed to just nipping it in the bud. And so I think that was informed by my early 20s with you guys and having the great the great team around you. I think Jack Murphy and all those guys were just very influential in how everything was kind of put together. It's like, yeah, man, you got it. Just go do it. And hey, you got a question? What's the question? Okay, well, what's the answer to your question? Well, I think it's this. Well, then you had the answer all along, didn't you? Kind of attitude. And so it was really informative to be around you guys and have that kind of influence on what I'm doing now, even, as a learning experience. Tell me, what are the companies facing right now as we're shifting and pivoting with this pandemic and all of that, and kind of let's go back into what we talked about a little earlier about, now is the time to maybe kind of do some things that you weren't doing before.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's a lot of stress and anxiety out there, and so companies who were prepared, who did contingency planning prior to this, and thought through it. And I'm on the board of directors of a company based out of Charlotte who believe it or not, back last winter, did an exercise for what if we had a pandemic, or what if we went to war? How would it affect our business and what we would do, and develop contingency plans? So serendipitously, this thing comes along, and they've got a plan in their back pocket, and really it has helped them mitigate, how the damage it's done. They were well prepared. So being prepared is important. Now, here we are. Folks are having to make hard decisions, and small businesses are obviously struggling, having to lay folks off. My firm is the cash flow business. It's cash in, cash out. And so consultants were gone pretty quickly when things started shutting down, And so, you have to figure out how to bail water and keep the ship afloat with clear priorities, and showing compassion to your workforce as you've never done before. I did a paper and published it on LinkedIn here 2 weeks ago on crisis management, crisis action centers, and how we have to have clear priorities for what we're focused on. We have to over communicate with folks. Think about all of those things we can be accomplishing. We've got a lot of work done in our firm while this has been going on. We've been focused on all those things that we didn't have time to get to previously: our processes, our procedures, our pitch decks, our sales decks, and reaching out, trying to help our former clients or potential clients work through this. Just trying to give them ideas for how to get out the backside. We should also, in our companies, be focused on our after action reviews right now. Capturing those lessons learned so that we can be better prepared next time something happens. Because who knows what it is? I mean, the 21st century has proven one thing unquestionably, and that is the only constant is change. And we're going to have these disruptions. And so we have to build companies that are agile enough and flexible enough to be able to maneuver through and survive when these disruptions occur in the space we do business in. And then how do we put a strategy together for coming out of this? We're not going to flip a switch and go back to the day before it all happened. It's funny, I was talking to some business leaders here a while back, and I remember as late as 2006 standing in Iraq, making the comment that I believe there are still Americans that feel that at some point we'll reach a point in this war where we flip a switch and we go back to September the 10th, 2001. And everything goes back the way it was. That's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen with this. That ship sailed. We have changed. We're learning things about ourselves, how we leverage technology. Do we need as much brick and mortar? Do we need sales teams on the road as much as we did before? So smart companies are focused on the things they can control now. They're developing strategies for how they come out of this, and we're trying to help them do that.
So I really liked the comparison you made between military units and kind of how the military operates and how businesses operate, and kind of that we can transpose kind of some ideas there. In the military, I was given way more responsibility than I ever was anywhere else in the civilian sector. I remember the very first day I showed up to my motor pool, and they said, "Hey, Lance Corporal Robb, so you're the new guy, right?" And I was like, yes, Corporal, I am. And he's like, "Cool, we need 4 trucks that need windshield changes. Go get 3 Marines and go get it done." And I was like, "I don't know how to get the windshield changed." And they're like, "Those other Marines will. Go." And I was just like, oh boy, here we go. And I heard a great quote once that was, don't hire smart people if all you're going to do is tell them what to do. So I really like what you said on that. But it's talking kind of about the things businesses should be doing. In the military, we come up with a plan, say, hey, if we lose comms, this is what we're going to do. And during training, we actually practice that, right? Should businesses be doing the same thing? Say like, hey, let's practice what happens if XYZ happens, and let's go through an exercise. Would you actually invite businesses to do that kind of stuff as well?
Absolutely. So you're talking about rehearsals and crisis action planning. Very few businesses, they'll come up with a plan, but Usually the senior executives know in their mind what two or three things are likely to go wrong, right? What could really throw us off course here? Smart business leaders say, okay, now let's develop a plan for if that happens. Those leaders rarely get caught in crisis action situations because they've already thought it through. They've always at least have a skeleton plan, and then they will rehearse those things. I was talking to a former boss of mine, former commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division, General Jeff Slosher, here recently, and he is the executive vice president for strategic pursuits at Bell, and he had rehearsals just a month ago with all of his guys. They rehearsed everything. So absolutely walking through it, because a lot of companies struggle with alignment, and there are two tools that I find that they don't do that we in the military do. One's back briefs. Don't assume that your people understood what you meant. Have them tell you back. Repeat back to me, what did you understand? So we understand that we have alignment. We have a mutual understanding, a common vision of whatever we're talking about. We don't do that much. And the second thing with the rehearsals, it does the same thing. We can now visualize what we're going to do. We can see it happening as we walk through it. Very effective tool.
So when you obviously transitioned from the military to your current job, did you really just be able to kind of look at a business and go, wait a second, why are you doing it this way? This leadership approach doesn't work. The way you're communicating doesn't work. Could you just immediately start seeing those types of problems in businesses?
So I don't necessarily understand, like I'm been working in the banking industry. I don't know a lot about banking except they help keep my money, and this is investment banking, so I give it to them and hopefully they make some cash for me, right? But people are people, so I'm focused on the human aspect. And for me now, our business touches technology, supply chain management, data analytics, everything, but I focus on the people. And it's pretty easy to go in and sit down with folks, do one-to-ones with their executive team, for example, and ask them, define the culture of this organization for me. What are the biggest challenges for you, completing your job day to day? What are your top priorities? Do you have priorities? Are they written down? And if I go to, and I use 360 assessments as well, but if I go to 10 or 15 people, you start to see themes. And you'll see blind spots. You'll see the areas where they're not aligned. You'll see if they have accountability problems. Well, why doesn't this stuff get done? Well, there's no forcing mechanism. Well, do you do one-to-ones? Do you know what a good one-to-one looks like? So as you sit down and you do an analysis of the company, you can see the company from a different perspective than they see themselves. That is the power of bringing an outside consulting group in. We used to hate in the military when you'd bring in a TRADOC inspection team or the Department of Evaluation and Standardization and come in and give you a look, and they were always here to help. So we used to hate that, but the truth is they see things you don't see. And so, yeah, it was for the companies that let you come in and they're totally transparent, they're open and honest. It's easy to help them grow because you can very quickly hone in on some things that you can move the needle on pretty rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the things that I noticed too is your processes may be fantastic, but the communication and the alignment, like you spoke about, you're not on the same page with. Yeah, your processes are established. You got policy, fantastic, but the people aren't trained, or you're not expressing the values of the company and how you should behave, and some of those guiding principles aren't there. So when it comes down to, again, looking at just the processes in the company and making sure your workflow is streamlined, it really sometimes that's a symptom of a leadership problem or something that we can solve from a leadership perspective. And so it's really interesting to see some of those takes and how those businesses are responding to things. I'd like to, kind of go into a little bit about what you're doing during this time and what what your business is seeing and how you're kind of moving forward and what kind of advice you can impart on our viewers for that.
Well, we're, as I said earlier, working on all the internal stuff that we can. We're also taking this time to catch up on, clients that we haven't talked to in a long time, the contacts out there that we know and they know are going to need help when we come out of this, and how we might be able to help them recover more quickly as they come out of this. There are opportunities here. And, smart business leaders are sitting down and they're noting the opportunity areas, and they're developing a strategy for how they're going after it when this thing, flips back on and we all go back to work. And so for us, those relationships are important. Our firm at Exactus, we pride ourselves in, our relationship with our clients. That's important. We roll up our sleeves and we work with them. And so maintaining those relationships in times like these, obviously we're not in their companies right now, but to maintain those relationships and do all we can do to help them now down the road, those are the friends you want, the ones that you reached out to and tried to put in a position to be able to quickly recover as this thing turns around.
How would you say that you guys are maintaining that relationship? Obviously, we talked about, we're almost zoomed out here. We've just zoomed as much as we can possibly do. I think I get on the couch and I'm just like, if I do another Zoom meeting, and then tomorrow I'm fine. But how are you guys maintaining those relationships? And is it just Zoom meetings and phone calls right now, or are you guys doing some extra marketing to kind of make sure that and some techniques to get into those clients' lives and make sure that they're being taken care of?
Yeah, so a combination of all of the above. We are doing a series of these Zoom. We're recording them; they're not live, and then we're posting them at exactusadvisors.com. And that content will be there for folks to look at. We're talking to business leaders throughout, many different industries. We did one on crisis management last week. We're about to do one on IT. So we got some CIOs coming on and saying, what does this mean to you? And what are you learning to try to share those best practices, that with businesses that may or may not have someone to talk to about this. So generate ideas for them. I'm doing one next Monday with Dr. Shauna Springer. She is a Harvard psychiatrist, and she deals with PTSD in the military primarily, but now we're leveraging that of what is the mental effect of this on your workforce? How is it stressing leaders, and how are they coping, and what can you do to help reduce the stress and anxiety in your workforce? So these are topics we're tackling that every business leader to some degree is dealing with. And so we've got those going up. We're writing white papers and posting those under our leadership and strategy tab at Exactus Advisors. We've got, white papers that we're starting to fill with a lot of the same stuff, just content that we're sharing for free, giving away for folks to be able to at least generate ideas, adapt it to their business. And then, of course, yes, reaching out, phone calls, trying to just listen to them, give these senior executives someone to vent to lay it out, and maybe we can help them think through some of their top priorities and be a friend.
So
very cool. What? Oh, go ahead, Philip.
Oh yeah. So obviously, COVID-19's kind of messed up, shooken up the marketplace quite a bit. And I saw a really funny little picture on the internet that said, who was the main leader who championed your company's digital transformation? Was it A, the CEO, B, the CTO, or C, COVID-19? So me being an IT guy and an IT background, I've been sitting there screaming, why in the world are we not utilizing this kind of stuff more often? And COVID-19 came around, and just all of a sudden every business is a remote work capable business. Do you think there's some skills that businesses will learn during this time, and things that people will become more proficient at that will help businesses in the long run?
Yeah, I was talking to a very senior executive in a Fortune 500 company a couple of days ago, and he said, "I never knew how much I wasn't needed. I never realized." He's like, "I'm way overpaid because things are going on without me. I'm not there, and it's amazing what's getting done." I'll give you just a simple tool, and no, I'm not getting paid for the endorsement, but a tool we're using, the whole Microsoft suite, but Microsoft Teams. Every one of us have that thing just open, and we collaborate all day long. And so, I'm sitting here in my living room writing on my book or working on slides, and I have a question or whatever. I just jump over to the chat in Microsoft Teams, and with the click of one button, we can go video or we can just chat. Everybody sees it. It's very collaborative, and everyone has situational awareness of what we're working. 8:45 every morning, our whole project management office, everybody jumps on for a 15-minute to align priorities. What are your priorities today? I'm working this project, this project. Nope, we need to bump that in priority. This is more important today because of this. So we're all aligned and prioritized every morning from the get-go, but we're sitting in our living room. Some companies didn't do that when they were all in one building under one roof, but with the technology, we're able to leverage it, and we're all plugged in. I think a lot of companies are looking around going, man, 30% of my workforce really doesn't need an office, or they could use a shared space. Do I need to be paying for electricity in this size of a building and everything, or could I run my company with a lot of telework? And so, but then back to, as an executive, okay, that's a new problem set. You have to think through now, when people aren't interacting eye to eye, face to face as much. How do you build those teams, those relationships? Don't let them shallow out. And that's why I like the video side of this, because this is still different than us just talking on the phone. We can see each other. And so I think we're learning, we needed a forcing function to, especially my generation and older. Okay, I'm 51, 60-year-olds didn't grow
Glad
up.
you
We
said
transitioned. Yeah, we transitioned to this. And so it's harder. But when you have to, necessity is the mother of all invention. Here we are figuring it out and leveraging it in a meaningful way.
Well, I think, when we were in Afghanistan too, we had, and I can't remember what it was called, is Adobe or whatever it was. Yeah. We had to do that. And it was kind of, you had to have that catalyst of, it's a little dangerous to fly, and it's costly to fly over to Bagram every day to do this safety briefing with the colonel. So, there's certain things that catalyze us to do these things. And this COVID-19 thing has pushed us all into our homes and made us get on Zoom or get on Google Meet or use Microsoft Teams and things like that. And you have to, again, be fluid and react. And if you don't know something, guess what? We do have the tools out there on YouTube. We do have these, these things. So it's easier than ever for anyone, not depending on the generation. I remember, I don't know if you remember Tyler Tomlinson. He is an old soul. He's an old soul. He was a 15 papa as well. And man, I tell you what, you set him in front of a computer and he said, man, I'm good. Thanks. So I think he's still a little bit like that, but smart guy, very full of common sense, but he just didn't like computers. And so he's younger than me. And so if it's catalyzing some things and some people that they weren't traditionally going to do, I think that's kind of it's a horrible thing that's happening, but it's a good thing in that transitional kind of catalyzing phase. So,
well, you bring up a great point. I mean, we were dispersed throughout RC East, and we actually did operations where we didn't have enough helicopters, or we had to pick up infantrymen at 5 or 6 different locations to go to one objective and work together as a team to accomplish that mission. We leveraged technology to do that. We did rehearsals on a computer with PowerPoint slides and walked through, took turns talking, looked at a map on a computer screen and rehearsed operations. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, picked everyone up, went to a shooting match and was able to accomplish it. So we've been doing this for a long time. It just hasn't been forced into business.
Yeah, that was something that was really unique in the business of the military. Was we were already having to use that stuff. It was already there. I mean, I remember sitting in those meetings, and you've got the combat action rehearsal that, we did at, in training, we would do in person. We'd do the big sand tables, and people would walk through the tape and the string and all that stuff and say, well, I'm Captain so-and-so, and my platoon is going to be over here or whatever. And then we had to disperse and do it all online. And you've got your little lines and your map and say, well, this platoon's going to go over here, and kind of just drawing on things. And so we've come a long way where we can share our screens and we can talk face to face, and we can kind of see each other's face and actually, somewhat effectively communicate via the internet. I know I was on a hot spot on my phone earlier. And so, there's all kinds of technology out there. And if these businesses now decide, hey, we're not going to necessarily need 15 desks in this office, so we need to move offices. I actually talked to a travel agency yesterday. She is downsizing her office because she really didn't need it in the first place. So I think they're going to do 4 desks instead of 20.
Well, it's really neat to see, kind of like with the way this conversation's going, it kind of really perfectly shows that, the needs of the warfighter can kind of be boiled down and say, well, those are the same needs of an employee. They both have their own missions. They both obviously have much different duties. But whereas a Marine needs a good solid rifle, a modern employee may need a good solid laptop. And without that, you don't have that force multiplier, and it really hurts you.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most common comments I get after I do a presentation is, "Wow, I had no idea how closely aligned we are." And I'm like, it's about people and relationships, and we're just doing a different function in terms of our jobs. Still all people, still have the same needs.
Yeah, I often kind of refer back to Jocko Willnick's book, Extreme Ownership. And what's really great about that book and the structure that they put into place is they've got the really cool wartime story with drama and excitement, and then just as much drama and excitement, but in a business setting, applied those rules in the same chapter. So they kind of balance those things out. And I think, it really does, when you don't think about, war fighting being the business, your risks are different, obviously. We had the risk of soldiers and lives and then aircraft and machinery and the cost of those things. All those were risk factors that we needed to mitigate, right? We don't want to risk lives unnecessarily, but we still have to execute our mission, right? Same thing goes for a business. It may not be risking lives, but it's risking jobs. It's risking shareholders' equity and things like that. So, you still have to examine and mitigate that risk and find out, what's going on in the business, and it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's really neat to hear, because me being a big aviation fan, I know the cost of aviation is quite high. And, if you think about, some of these smaller West Texas type businesses where they have a bunch of stores or locations throughout, small towns, for them to jump at a citation to have an on-site meeting, the amount of costs and time and money to do that versus simply doing a Zoom call and realizing because of this event, how great and how simple that can be. Those differences can be huge to a business.
Sure.
Yeah. So Jimmy, tell us about. Let's go into your books. I want to definitely make sure people know that we've already kind of talked a little bit about your books. We've got Cowboys Over Iraq. We've got Palehorse. Tell us about those books and why you read them or wrote them, and let's talk about those a little bit.
Well, I wrote them out of order. I wrote Palehorse first, which was 2008 to 10, when I commanded Task Force Palehorse, and particularly 2009, that year in Eastern Afghanistan. It was an extraordinary year, a time in which 5 medals of honor were earned, the most iconic battles of our generation, so to speak, in Eastern Afghanistan. And I wanted to share our soldiers' story. It was never about me. I chose battles specifically that I was not the air mission commander or the project manager, so to speak, and I felt that year deserved to be written and captured in history. Excuse me. And so that was kind of my motivation for writing it. Obviously, I spent a lot of time explaining the dilemmas I had as a leader, the things I had to think my way through, the risk that I took because it was incredibly volatile that year, and we were stretched very thin. We didn't have the resources necessarily to do the missions that we were done, and that was just the nature of the beast at the time. And so Palehorse captures that year. Then I'd always wanted to write about the invasion of Iraq. I thought it was a very colorful, exciting story because we were kind of making it up as we went. 99% of us had never been to combat, and those who had was, they were Gulf War veterans, so it was a 100-hour war, and so it was war for the first time for us, and a lot of crazy things happened, and there were a lot of colorful characters in that organization at the time. But I had a leader who was he'd spent 13 years of his career in the 160th, and an exceptional leader who really did trust and empower subordinates in a unique way, was willing to assume more risks than any of his peers I've ever met, probably more than any lieutenant colonel I've ever met in my life, but was incredibly successful, had the support of General Petraeus, who thought the world of him. General Petraeus wrote the foreword to Cowboys over Iraq. And so Steve Schiller was unique. He was incredibly competent tactically and technically, but also was very charismatic as a leader, led from the front on everything. People just wanted to follow him. And so I wanted to capture that, but also give it some color with some warrant officers we had. We had an Australian exchange officer as well. And so this is that story, walking into war for the first time, and but then knowing before I even came home when I was going back. It was really the beginning of what would be a very, very long relationship with war for me over the next decade, 12 years, dozen years, I guess.
Very neat. I know I personally own a signed copy. Thank you. We met for breakfast that one time. That was really good. Signed copy of Palehorse. I've read that. I'm looking forward to reading Cowboys over Iraq. I'm not going to lie. I don't have it yet. Kind of waiting for I want to get with you and get a signed copy, I guess. So I'll have to get a copy and meet up with you once the COVID-19 thing clears up. I was actually going to go to the Appalachian Trail. You were going to do a section hike, right?
Yeah.
And so I was going to do a through hike, and that my through hike is canceled. So I might have to join you for the section. How about that? Are you still on maybe doing that this summer?
I don't know yet. We're taking a bunch of young, 12 to 18-year-olds, so we got to kind of wait and see how things go.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, for your books, we've got some links on our on the video. So when you go to the video, we've got those links to those books. You can find them on both of them on Amazon. And if you click on the author's name, you can actually, I believe you can find the other books, right, on Amazon as well. So you've got kind of an author page with all of your books, right? Yeah. So yeah, definitely check out those books. They're fantastic. I know Philip's been reading Cowboys over Iraq. I can't figure out how to get my new iPad hooked up to my not Audible. What's the other one?
Kindle.
Kindle. Yeah. So I need to get that hooked up. Yeah. So Jimmy's written those books. Again, I look forward to reading them. Tell us where, remind everybody, I guess, again, where we can find you and what's coming up next for you.
Yeah, well, exactusadvisors.com or jimmyfblackmon.com. Either one gets you to me. The Exactus page with the leadership and strategy there shows what we as a firm do, and we're just trying to help businesses and looking forward as we come out of this to be able to go help folks seize opportunities and move their businesses in a direction that they want them to go.
Perfect. I'm sharing some of those links on the comments here for exactusadvisors.com. I also shared your, I think you shared with us a link beforehand, so I shared that to your LinkedIn as well for the crisis action and things like that.
Yeah.
What else is coming up for you? I know plans are kind of in flux right now. You got some public speaking engagements that are still kind of on the books for the fall?
Well, I've still got stuff in the fall, third quarter. I'm hoping that at least the speaking stays around. The big question will be, when companies do start coming back, how, flash to bang between coming back, recovering losses, and then spending money externally, sort of discretionary spending. We believe, though, that leveraging a firm like ours will help that process, and it's an investment that'll pay dividends later on. But that's still to be seen, and I'm sure it'll vary, based on the industry and the size of the companies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very, that's a great thought to have, is like, who's going to be spending money on certain things, and what are they going to be doing, and that kind of, it may inform your targeting and your prospecting at this point. Even we're in mid-April here, we need to be prospecting the proper clients for the fall, no matter what industry, because who's going to be responsive to sales and things like that. I guess our kind of final wrapping up kind of stuff, and then we'll go into our wrapping up stuff. But for you, what are some of the books? What are some of the resources, podcasts, things like that have helped you along the way? What do our viewers need to be reading right now, listening to podcasts? What do they need to be doing?
Well, I don't listen to any business podcasts really. I listen to music podcasts and Lance Armstrong's We Do and the Forward cycling, which is now wiped out for the season as well. But in terms of books, it is a good time to catch up on reading. So after they read my two books, a good place to go would be, I thought that was funny, apparently you didn't, would be to read, Jim Collins' Good to Great is a staple. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. There are a few books that are timeless, I believe, because they really teach us how to behave as leaders, how we can get the things we want through behavior, and get a desired outcome. And so those are always great ones to go to. Measure What Matters. I'm in strategic planning, I use objectives and key results, so Measure What Matters is great. The Ideal Team Player and The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, both great books to read. But this is a time, you make a good point, that hopefully folks are leveraging to read some of those things that could help them professionally be more effective as a leader.
Absolutely. So, Phil, what do you got for Jimmy?
So you answered part of my question that I've been wanting to ask, which is, for people like me that are younger in their careers, obviously one of the big career goals of mine is to become a very effective, very good leader. And obviously, just like in the military, we start off with knowledge, getting that knowledge and reading these types of books and stuff. How do you, let's say I go ahead and I read all these books, how do we start doing practical application? Like how do you start actually applying those skills once you've gotten that?
Great question. And obviously I'm a storyteller, so I have a story for everything, right? So I I was in Bosnia in '97, and I needed to get to Germany, and I needed a flight, a C-130, and there was only like one flight in the morning and the afternoon, and there were always people fighting to get on this thing. It was tough to get on it, and I needed to get a seat. It was a C-130, so it wasn't very big, and I'd read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and in there he talks about, before you go to business, find some commonality, a mutual interest or something. Make small talk there, and then you've won the person over. Now they want to help you. And so there was a Marine gunny sergeant who was running the manifest down at Tuzla. So I go in, and he's sitting at his desk, and I knew this guy has the keys to the car. He can get me on this airplane if he wants me on this airplane. So I walked in, I noticed that he had a Alabama little football helmet sitting behind him. And I immediately thought of Dale Carnegie, and I said, "You an Alabama football fan?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, we're not going to fight right now, but I'm from Georgia." And he just kind of laughed. He, made a joke. "You don't want to fight me, sir." And we go into SEC football for the next 10 minutes. I didn't even have to bring it up. At like 10 minutes into this SEC football discussion, he says, "What can I help you with, sir?" And I said, "I need to get on this flight coming in." He said, "Oh, let me see what I can do." I got a seat on the flight.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I think that's
It's
one
that
of the
simple.
that we talk about all the time is just build that common interest and build, figure out what something that really relates to whoever you're talking to. I mean, that's as old as time, just making sure that you can even figure something out that they like, and even just listen to them, even if that's not your favorite thing. Having them be able to talk about those things is fantastic, and it goes a long way with just winning friends and influencing people, I guess, right?
Yep.
So really, do you end up rereading those types of books to kind of keep that stuff
So
fresh in your
that was
mind?
the second time on that one. I had read How to Win Friends and Influence People in college, and I had some downtime in Bosnia, and so I was like, I'm gonna read a few books, and I was like, I'm gonna reread that one. So yeah, that was the second time I'd gone through it. And Cory, you said timeless. It was written in 1929, so yeah, it's been around a long time.
I didn't even know that. Wow.
I think I've got like I've got a really old copy, and then I've got a really new copy. And of course, I just moved. Today's the second day in this place, so they're all in books, including Palehorse. I was gonna like hold it up, but I've got a really old copy, and I need to check the date, because I think that thing is it's got to be from early 1900s, and I feel like someone in the military gave it to me, and I don't know who it was. There's no name in it, and they wanted me to borrow it because I'm abrasive sometimes, and so they wanted me to borrow it.
I bought a copy for everyone and all the leadership in Palehorse. So there was a big box of them then. So you made a book in 2009.
Well, that may have been the newer one.
Yeah.
Did you buy like first edition copies for?
No.
Because I've got this really old version. Or you know what? Maybe he already had one. He had the old one, and then he got the brand new one, and he passed it down, the old one, to me, just to borrow or something. But I want to give it back to whoever gave it to me. So if you're watching and you gave me a Dale Carnegie book, then it's probably yours. I'll mail it back to you, I guess. But,
Someone's sitting there trying to collect.
Yeah, there's so many things. I think I ended up with someone's like headlamp, and it had their initials on it. I was like, these aren't my initials. Whose initials are these? And I had to think about it, and I finally, like 5 years later, I was like, oh, these are so and so's. This is so and so's headlamp, and now I can't find either one of my headlamps. So
I only have one Woodlands cover. It was my last cover to wear in camis, and it's still sitting in my closet. And I looked at it the other day, and it says Rand Spot, and I remember Corporal Rand Spot. And so if you're listening, I still have your cover. I guess I never got it back to him.
I didn't steal anything on purpose out there. I promise. Things just, things get exchanged. Well, Jimmy, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and close up on Thursday at noon. We've got Dr. Cory Thuett. She's going to talk about health in your home office, and when you return back to work, health in the office. I've already received It's Time to Stand, Cory, on my watch. So, we're ready to go. But next Thursday, we've got Cory Thuett. We've got some great guests coming up for the rest of the month. We've got all kinds of different stuff going on. Go find Jimmy Blackmon at jimmyfblackmon.com, exactusadvisors.com, and he's got some great stuff on LinkedIn. His entire team is putting out those white papers. Go check him out. He's going to be on lots of podcasts, so check those out. And definitely go to Amazon right now and buy both of those books, because those things are, he is a great storyteller. And I've having read at least one of his books, I can definitely attest to that. So I'm Cory Myers with Lubbock Consulting.
And I'm Philip Robb with Robb Technology Group.
And that's our show, guys.
All right. Appreciate y'all coming and seeing us.